What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about target shafts and large diameter, small diameter, what's used for what, who should be using what based on draw length, draw weight, and all that. So we're going to start with large diameter shafts. So most commonly up until just probably the last 6 or 7 years, large diameter shafts were pretty much reserved for indoor. So this is an X7. This is made by Easton. Probably hands down the most common shaft you're going to see. Now they make these in 3 different sizes. There's a 23 diameter, 25, and a 27 diameter. You'll also notice there's like 23 15s, 23 14s, 23 12s. The 23, or the first 2 numbers basically, are referring to the diameter, and then the 12, 13, 14 behind the 23 or 27 or whatever it is referring to the wall thickness. Now, for most adult male shooters, I would say, if you're shooting an arrow that's over 28 inches, 28 and a half inches, a 27 is going to be the most common. Now, a 27 is the largest diameter that the NFAA will allow in regulated competition. So, for any shoot that's not like USA Archery or World Archery sanctioned, a 27 diameter is going to give you essentially the most forgiveness in missing. For those of you who aren't familiar with why large diameter shafts are used in indoor competition, it's because if I'm at all touching the line, the official rule is if the arrow breaks the integrity of the scoring line, then I get that higher score. So by shooting a larger diameter shaft, I have a little more leeway of missing. Whereas say like a standard hunting arrow, I might be a 64th of an inch away from the line. This is going to cut the line. So this is by far and away, like I said, this is on all aluminum shaft. It's really stiff. They don't have a spine rating like a carbon arrow does, but you wouldn't want to shoot these for outdoor because they're so stiff. Most guys are running anywhere from a 200 to a 300 grain point, and then the shaft itself is, these are 11.3 grains per inch. So by the time you get this arrow built, you're probably like 700 grains. So it's really slow, but they're perfectly straight. You're not shooting groups with them. It's 1 arrow per target. There's no wind, so you don't have to, speed is not an issue. You just want accuracy and forgiveness. So this is definitely a very common shaft. Now, recently they've started making a lot of carbon arrows in the same diameter. So Gold Tip has like the XXX and the X, Carbon Express has the X Buster. Easton's made the Super Drive series, and they have a Super Drive 27. The benefit to a large diameter shaft that's a little bit lighter, like the carbon like that, is it just gets off your bow a split second faster. So the less time that arrow's on your bow, the less time you have to screw things up. So that's been a really popular shaft. I was playing around with the Super Drive 27s this year, and they shoot really, really well. That being said, when you put both this, the X7 and the Super Drive 27 on a straightness reader, they are not as straight as this. Now, when I say not as straight, I'm talking 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch. Most people are not good enough to know, if that miss came from them or because their arrow is, 1/1000th of an inch out of perfectly straight. But that's something to think about. Now, if you are, let's say like a youth or a woman, and you have short draw length, lower poundage, a 27 diameter arrow like this is going to be way too stiff. So you're probably going to want to shoot something like a 23-15 or a 25-12, something that's a little smaller diameter but a little more flexible. You're going to get a lot more forgiveness in an arrow that's flying and tuned well out of your bow than one that just has a big giant cutting diameter. On top of that, if you're shooting USA Archery, any USA Archery sanctioned shoots, a 23 diameter is the largest that they will allow. So that's something to keep in mind. So that kind of breaks down our indoor shafts. Now, outdoor shafts for 3D, there's a lot of different options. So most target companies now, like if you look at Black Eagle, Easton, Gold Tip, they have these large diameter shafts, but they're extremely light. So this is the Super Drive 25 from Easton. They make a Super Drive 19, a Super Drive 23, a Super Drive 25, and a Super Drive 27, which I was just talking about for indoors. Now, the 27 I think is probably a little too much. They really don't shoot that well at distance. But these Super Drive 25s are extremely popular. The 25 diameter or a 23 diameter arrow is very popular. Now, the difference with these is, whereas that 27 was 11.1 grains per inch, this arrow is 7.8 grains per inch. So it's a very light arrow, even though it's all carbon, even though it's large cutting diameter. Now again, the benefit of that is the larger diameter means I'm going to catch more scoring rings, and then being light, especially if you're shooting unknown, which most 3D competitions are, you're shooting unknown yardage. A flatter shooting arrow is not going to punish me as bad if I misjudge the yardage. You know, if I think the target's 35 and it's actually 38, a lighter arrow is not going to drop as much in those 3 yards. So a flatter shooting, larger diameter arrow is going to give you more forgiveness on the 3D course. Now with these, they don't have nearly as stiff of a spine as the aluminum ones. So most people with these are running anywhere between like 110 to 150 grain point, and that's all going to come down to the length of the arrow you're shooting. These are a 290 spine, although they tend to behave a little bit weaker than that, it seems like, just in my experience. But you are going to need to load up that point weight a little bit, especially if you don't want to risk what we call skip outs. So, you know, if I have 3 or 4 guys in the 12 ring and I shoot an arrow that only weighs, you know, got no point weight in it, it's got an 85 grain point. When that arrow hits the back of another arrow, it's not just going to bust it and keep penetrating, it's going to deflect out and you're going to miss points. So most guys are running, like I said, I think these are 125s on this arrow. This is actually probably a little stiff with the 125. This arrow's cut pretty short. This is just one of my boss's arrows that he's playing around with. But you'll see a lot of guys now running, you know, Black Eagle makes the PS series, so PS 23s, 26s, 27s. And again, they're lightweight, large diameter, to give you that more forgiveness. Now, if you're looking for an outdoor target arrow or field arrow, that's a completely different animal, because if I try to shoot 6 or 7 of these in one dot, or even just 3 of these in one dot, I've only got room for maybe 2 or 3 of these in an X ring. So if you're going outdoor target, for example, like USA archery stuff, or, you know, like Redding style shoots or field archery, you go the complete opposite direction. You go with an extremely small diameter arrow. So these are the Easton Pro comps that I've been shooting for this last year. Other arrows that Easton makes are like the X10s, ACEs, these Pro comps, and most of these are going to be in a carbon aluminum mix. So rather than being aluminum on the outside and carbon on the inside like the FMJ hunting arrows are, these are carbon on the outside and aluminum on the inside. So they're perfectly straight. They're lightweight. They come in a wide variety of spines. So I think these go down to like 700 all the way up to a 300 in the Pro comp. And the idea with the really skinny arrows is 2 things. You know, small diameter shoots better at distance, largely due to the fact that there's less drag. If it's windy, there's less surface area, so it's not going to push the arrow as much. And then they're also fairly light, so they're moving quickly. So again, in a windy condition, I want an arrow that's small diameter, so it's not getting pushed by the wind as much, and I want it to get to that target fast, because the longer that arrow is in the air, the longer that it has time to be pushed by the wind. A shoot like Redding, I'd say your average target is probably 40 yards, with lots of them in that 60 to 80, or there's only a couple that are 80, but most of your shots are stretched out a little bit. Again, also with the small diameter, if you're doing a shoot like a NFA field shoot, and you're shooting 4 arrows per dot, you know, I don't want to skip out. I don't want a big arrow in that dot, because the chances of me hitting it, A, I'm going to be busting arrows all the time, and B, I'm going to, you know, get deflections and miss points. So you want small arrows that are coming out of the bow quick. And like I said, there's a large variety in spines. You know, you can kind of play around with it. Like, technically for my bow, I should be shooting a 340 if I wanted to cut it to like 29 inches. But I actually went an opposite route, and I went with the 380 spine, but then I cut them to like 27 inches. So this arrow actually only sits about 1/8 of an inch over my blade on my rest. But I picked up a little speed with it, and cutting it shorter like that actually made it about the same stiffness as a 340. I'm running the 120 grain points on these. I think you can get them up to like 130 or 140, but really in terms of flight characteristics, you know, FOC is is not a deal for target archery. I would never build an arrow to a specific FOC. I play around with length and point weight until I find one that groups the best and is spined and tunes the best out of my bow. And then when I calculate the FOC, it's usually never more than about 15%. Anywhere in that 10 to 15% range for flight characteristics and grouping seems to be the best. Oh my gosh, the phone, hang on. We're closed. So, just thought I'd kind of go over that a little bit for outdoor arrows. Like I said, you know, large diameter indoor for 3D, they're two completely different animals. I would not shoot the same arrow for both. If you're building a, you know, target specific arrow. Now, you know, if you want kind of one arrow that can do it all, I would think, you know, like that Super Drive 25, you could shoot indoor with it, you could shoot 3D with it, and it's going to perform well for you. But you certainly wouldn't want to shoot any sort of field archery with a large diameter arrow. So I had a couple questions on target arrows. You know, this is not hunting based. We're not concerned about penetration, so don't tell me, oh, that 360 grains is way too light, because that's about what these weigh. They're about 368 grains. So yeah, they move really quick. I'm shooting like 315 feet a second at 60 pounds and a 29.5-inch draw with this. So if you have any questions on this, please feel free to comment below or hit me up on Instagram. I'm really trying my best to get back to everybody, but I probably get 60 or 80 messages a day now, and it's just, there's not enough hours in the day after working 8 or 10 hours to get to everybody as they come in. So I'm sorry if there's a little bit of a delay there, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. So thank you guys for watching. Go get yourself a target set up. It's a lot of fun in the off season. Helps take your shooting to the next level all the way around. If you're a good target shooter, you're going to be a good shooter when you're bow hunting. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. And remember, precision is the decision. Keep them in the middle, and I'll see you on the range.